In reviewing available bodies of information on concussion laws around the country, I think the National Conference of State Legislatures has really prepared a good overview of what's available around the country. So I'm going to be circulating that for you. What I've done is I've highlighted some of the interesting differences between the states. And what's interesting is that a lot of states share a few high-level similarities in the ways that they have written concussion protections for youth. Most revolve around guidelines for education and information for youth athletes, parents, or guardians, training for coaches, and of course, what coaches, how you define coaches is important. Immediate removal of a young person if there is a fear of a concussion or injury, and then clearance for full or in some cases graduated return to play by a medical professional. Some states also include, as you'll find in the circulated document, minimum time requirements for return to play. Some are even up to 24 hours. Some of the laws impact different age groups. Some focus on the older children, others don't have such restrictions. Expanded definition of athlete to include other athletes on the field, such as cheerleaders. Loss of consciousness in one particular state is interesting. Loss of consciousness is a threshold for whether or not medical clearance is required. It seems like a pretty high bar. Under some laws in some states, private and charter schools and some community-based activities are also included. And finally, there are in some states exemptions for merely provided government-owned space to play, so that by merely providing a government-owned field or recreation area, it doesn't necessarily bring you under the government guidelines for tracking concussions in young children. So there are interesting differences in the laws in the various states. Some states are more comprehensive in their protections than others. Some states have really focused on information, while others focus more on the procedures for removing a young person. The invitation is that what you'll find in this compendium, I've highlighted some of the things that are more interesting, but what you'll find is that you're going to have questions about what you see, and you may want further clarification. And I'd be happy to make myself available to you for any clarifications that you need on any of the states, because I think that somewhere in this collection, and perhaps in what is inspired by what you see, is a solution or a potential solution for the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Steve? I will make a comment here, as I've heard the terms being thrown around the room a bit, as well as I look at legislation. People are throwing around the terms signs and symptoms. They're not the same. There are signs of concussions, which we would ask our coaches to be aware of, but this, even in the Brookline statement, it said be aware of symptoms, which means that you're interviewing and evaluating the patient for other symptoms. So we want to make clear, because I look at some of the legislation about being responsible for symptoms, when I sort of read the rest of it, I get the feeling that what they really mean is signs. So we should be clear in our language, I think, that there's signs of concussions, those as an external observer would see, and there are symptoms, those that the person actually feels.
I just wanted to know too, we'll put this up on the web page that we have, and the state of Utah had offered to join us on the phone for questions and answers about their legislation, but given the time, they've offered to join us at a later meeting. So if people have questions for that state, they'll be online with us at a later point. Thanks.
I would just like to ask the group, because we have a lot of experts here, about the term intramural. I know the previous legislation talks about intramural and what we need to do for that group. And I know it's usually related to school sports, but we have school sports going down, right through kindergarten, after school activities. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around what that term intramural really means. Or is it defined anywhere?
I don't know, Paul, if you might have an answer to that, but I would just say that I know that Carissa Niehoff did mention in her presentation that CIAC regs cover PK to 12 in the school. So the task force here is most definitively outside of the scholastic environment.
Because intramurals is one of the areas that requires a coaching permit. The State Department of Education has defined intramurals as being a sports activity related to children where a coaching permit is required. So there obviously must be a definition within certification of what they're using to determine what is an intramural activity.
I did ask Carissa, and she wasn't, she did not have any information on that.
Nancy Pugliese did not have anything on that?
I did not ask her, Nancy.
So I would ask the Bureau Chief for a definition of intramurals that they're using to determine who needs a coaching permit.
I have a quick question. I think this kind of feeds off hers and as well as Dr. Wong, your earlier opening presentation. And it's clarifying youth sports. Are we discussing pre-high school or are we discussing all rec sports? So it would be the soccer travel league in high school. Anything outside the legislation that's been done, because the legislation that we have right now is really specific to high school interscholastic sports.
I think we're talking ages 3 to 11.
So 3 to 11. So we're not even talking middle school.
I asked this question of Representative Urban at the very beginning in our first meeting with her prior to the press meeting, and I wanted to make sure we understood what age group that she was referring to, and it was that group that has just been defined. I don't think that means that we can't stop from having suggestions about other groups too, but it is our mandate that we primarily address that group.
It'd be great to get a clarification from her.
I think too, just building on what the co-chairs have said, I believe that Representative Urban had also expressed that if there were, she didn't want the task force to feel that it wasn't possible to have recommendations for future things to look at, so that might fall under that purview. The task force charged legislative intent is ages 3 to 12 outside of the scholastic environment. Thank you.
One other question on this handout. Thank you so much for doing this. I know how much work it is. But can we clarify, is this all legislation relating to any sports in the state and not specifically to what I call youth sports, which would be outside of interscholastic high school? Because some states have, well, every state now, as you know, has legislation, but they have it very specific to youth sports because the way that they administer it and the way that they can put teeth in it is very different at the interscholastic level versus the youth. And I think as we go through each one of these states, it's really important to know, because provisions that you can do at the high school level is much trickier at the youth level.
I think you're going to find that most states in the collection that you have in your hands really manage school activity. There are very few states that actually focus on out-of-school activities. And where they do, it's really on training. So you'll find that most states are actually managing in-school activities because, as you said, that's where they have the most control.
Thank you.
I would agree. I think, Diana, you probably have this, but I'm just doing a quick count right now, and I'm probably around 15, maybe 15, less than 20 states that are actually addressing the group that we're talking about through the public health.
We got that information from the Network for Public Health Law,
right. And
I think it was 18 at the time, but that was, almost a year ago.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a fair question. It's for the committee task force to consider.
I think that will come up. I mean, as long as we still address our primary goals.
Okay.
We got a couple of minutes.
I'm sorry, I have a question for some of these our medical friends here. Starting at age 3, how many athletic concussions are you guys finding among 3-year-olds? I'm just surprised by that age range. I've got I've got all sorts of age kids, but the young kids, I mean, they don't even get into, or mine didn't, until they were like 5 or 6. So the 3 and 4-year-olds, trying to educate them, I think is going to be mostly educating parents, and also where are the concussions happening? I believe that they're having them, but I suspect it's not from sports.
I agree with you. And in fact, if you ask, what do we see? I'd see that it's extremely rare for me personally. Now, Karen may have a different opinion, because your population is maybe even younger than mine. But from my experience, it's so small.
Oh, I agree with you, David. You know, many head injuries in children are not in organized sports at all, no matter what age they are. They don't have to be 3. You know, so childhood is a dangerous game. They're out there playing and having fun, and you know, so we do see head trauma from many other